Okay. Okay. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to GEET Part 2. And as part of what's happening, what I'd like to mention tonight is that we've got some in addition to Paul, we've got some very highly esteemed and honored guests here. To my left is David, Paul's son, who flew in from Europe just to be here for this conference for today. Next we have Forrest Pittman. Forrest, I cannot tell you all the details, but the incredible part that he played, and the time and the expense in helping get Paul out, it's just unbelievable. And next to him is George Gabori and his wife Catherine. And George was the moderator for our conference calls. George and Catherine spent their life savings help doing this battle to help get Paul out. And I just want to say that a warm, hearty round of appreciation for these four people here. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Now, without any further ado, back to our most highly honored and esteemed guest. It's my honor. No, it's my privilege. Actually, it's my pleasure to reintroduce to you again, Paul Pantone. Thank you.
Until you get the other mic working. They're still working on the other mic, so until they get the other mic on, is it working now? Oh, okay.
It should be.
There you go. There were a couple of questions that, as we were wrapping up and leaving, someone had asked, she has a car and wants to get it retrofit. We're not retrofitting, we're not selling kits. We are going to be selling components to dealers or to the public. If you want to get the plans and say, hey, I want to build this, but I need this one part, between now and September 15th, we are going to start offering the parts so that you can buy the components you need. If you don't see what you need, you can email the parts division and they will start manufacturing parts for the people, and we're going to establish prices that we can as fair as possible. Also, any of you who'd like to get a card, I'll have the cards up here. When I'm done, come on up and get a card or two so you can reach me. The website is geet.nl. I'm easy to find there, and usually you can find me at least 3 times a week on somebody's radio show. Now, are there any other questions before we move on to the pictures again?
Yeah. On the tubing or the distance between the end of the reactor tube and the microphone. Yeah, I'm trying to find it.
Go ahead and ask, and we'll repeat it.
On the tube, from the end of the reactor to the carburetor, how critical is that, and what dimension or orientation do you have to use?
There is no orientation required after the reactor for any tubing or any delivery system going up into the engine itself.
How about the distance? Is that critical?
No, it is not. The distance... Got me good, thanks. I needed that.
No, that wasn't you, that was us.
Good.
Mike actually looking for the speaker.
Okay. The distance does not make any difference. The diameter does. If you're using half-inch feed, continue with half feet all the way. If you're going quarter-inch, stick with a quarter-inch all the way. Do not cause pressure differences. It will slow down the fuel from getting to the engine. Okay, if there's no other questions, we're going to get back to the pictures. Okay, we've already hit most of this, that the electrons are being pulled in from 60 feet away. If the rod is horizontal like this, the 60 feet are going to be from this edge outward, both sides. If it is straight up and down, biblical north, it'll be 360 degrees pulling electrons. You'll also, if you build this all out of plastic or Lexan or Pyrex, we will have some of the photographs of the Pyrex units up between now and September 15th, but you will also see the ball of white light. The plasma ball that is occurring inside that chamber is really beautiful. You don't want to stare at that too long. It's best if you have colored lenses to look through to look at it, because it does get pretty bright. And you don't want to be looking at that through a glass chamber if you over rev the engine. So if you've got an engine that normally runs at 3,500, don't rev it up to 12,000 to look at it. It's going to be lighting your room up already. If you're on a 350 Chevy, don't crank it past about $4,000 or $5,000 when you're looking at it. It will get that bright. We filled a room about this size at the Hormel Conference Center down in Phoenix, Arizona, and the scientists who were there wanted the demonstration of the light. So we went ahead and ran the engine at about 10,000 RPM with a glass chamber. We turned off the lights, and the scientists said that it was like having a 1,000-watt light bulb shining in their eyes. We don't do that because it could be harmful to somebody, but we will be putting it up on the help.
Yeah, well, we finally got you on the camera.
Okay. The brightness is painful to the eyes. Okay. Yeah, as I was just saying, thank you. Didn't need to accentuate that, though. The most fun part of the discovery for many years, when I first got to Utah, we had a lot of people wanting to find out why was it working, what's happening inside. People from U of U invited us up for some private testing, and BYU invited me, and I said, really? You're going to take me down to BYU? I like this. So we loaded up the truck, and we snuck into campus. We had to hide behind the maintenance building until all the students were in class. Then we had to have it all tarped up, and we snuck it in down the sidewalk to their nuclear lab, went down inside the nuclear lab, they closed the doors up and pretended we weren't there for 3 days. And while we were there, we ran the engine on crude oil. In the bubbler chamber, we ran it so that the vapor could be pulled off through a special sensor and hooked up to their mass spectrometer. We have that picture coming up here in a few minutes, so I won't go any further on that. Here, you will see, though, one of the results of that test was when you have carbon or sulfur coming in, it doesn't come out. It comes out as a lighter element because of the transmutation, because of all the extra electrons that came into the chamber, because of the heat exchange, the expansion. All of these things in combination change the structure, but not the atomic weight. If you start out with sulfur at atomic weight 32, you're going to get 32 particles of hydrogen. Weighs the same amount, so the same amount of mass in and out is still there. For many years, scientists said carbon in, carbon out. That does not apply, but the atomic weight does. Next picture, please. Oh, wait, I have that button, don't I? All I got to do is figure out which one it is. Yeah, that's neat. This explains it a little bit better. As the particle of sulfur moves down the reactor rod, it expands to twice its size by the time it gets to the halfway point. It is expanding because it's being accelerated through this chamber. At the same time, it's pulling the heat in from the surrounding chamber, spinning in the opposite direction. It then expands again to double its size at the halfway point between the center and the end. This continues until it has completely broke down. You end up with a hydrogen, or what we're going to see in another picture. This was the outline of what we did there at BYU. Running it from this chamber, there was no helium present in the crude oil and salt water that we used, but 72 other vapor elements were there. Once it went through the chamber, past the reactor rod, and came out the other end, we had 12 elements twice and 13 elements the third time. The 13th element that they came out with on the mass spectrometer showed that it weighed 2.4. Hydrogen is 1. Helium is 4. It is somewhere between the two. It does not have the properties of hydrogen. It will not explode. It implodes. Instead of giving heat off, it pulls heat in. During this process, we had ice forming all the way around here while we were in their laboratory. They also found that we had an abundance of helium, hydrogen, and oxygen. They could not explain the helium because there was no helium here. The only way to have achieved helium at that point and a missing 60 elements was there was a transmutation. The heavier elements were being broken down into lighter elements, and this is the first time we were allowed into a university to prove it. I felt pretty proud, and I was really happy going, oh, we got it all hooked up to a computer and a printer. I'm going to leave here with some documents. At the end of 3 days, they said, I'm sorry, Mr. Pantone, but nothing that we did can leave the laboratory. We got in trouble when we said cold fusion worked. And this is worse than cold fusion for publicity. If word got out that you can actually have clean air and oil isn't needed, and gas isn't needed, that could hurt our industry, our schools. And the man who writes our check says that this doesn't exist. So the reason the universities will not allow it on campus is we have the American Society of Engineers, we have oil companies, we have car companies, and we have governments sponsoring those universities. After that, I started going to other Christian universities throughout the country. They allowed us in, they allowed us their auditoriums, we gave presentations, they were all happy. A few of them wanted to continue our education with their students. And we willingly said yes to Lutherans, Catholics, anyone who would teach it. The Cedarville Baptist Church School up in Ohio, they said it was going to be taught in their school. They wanted us to come down. When we got to their auditorium, the first 3 rows were all military people from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Teachers behind that for 2 rows, and then students in the back. After the demonstration, and we ran it on soda pop, gasoline, diesel, kerosene, had a great time. We left plans for them. We were going to leave an engine for them, and they said, I'm sorry, we're not allowed to have that here. You'll have to remove it from the property. I said, why? And they said, because we have been told we'll lose all of our grant money, our budget money. We will be cut off from any government or public assistance at our university. So take your stuff and go home. Many of you have said, well, why can't we go to Caterpillar, Detroit, Diesel, Cummins? Well, the reason you can't go there is they don't want it. I met with Wärtsilä. I've met with a lot of these different companies. Waukesha. They said, we don't have anything even close to what you're doing. But we're not going to let you get there. If anybody puts it on our equipment, we'll void the warranty. We're going to tell people it's dangerous if we have to. We're going to find some way to make sure you don't succeed. I don't know if you can imagine going into a car lot and saying, I'd like to buy 2 brand new Crown Vics, and saying, I'm sorry, you're not welcome here, get off our property, the cops are on their way. But it happened up in Salt Lake. Because the New York City Cab Company said, if you could put that on the 2 models of Crown Vic we want, you've got 13,000 cabs. Problem was, we couldn't get a car to put it on. When we got back in touch with the cab company, they said, well, we were told to change our minds. We don't have enough money to cover the warranty work for the next few years, because they said they're not going to cover any warranty if we put it on 1 car. So when you're threatened by the big guys, you've got to go back to grassroots, which is what this is all about. Next picture. Yeah, you don't have to do that. This one is a lot of fun for me. When we were doing our testing, we found that the test results from the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere were totally opposite at times. And that was even more mind-boggling. I mean, here we've got an engine that runs perfect in this direction, but not this direction. We didn't know why for years. We've made other discoveries that we didn't know why. When we found out that the lunar cycle actually affects the running of an engine, that was unheard of. But we've got documentation to prove it. We started getting the results from the people in Germany that were testing it, and they were saying that the rod, north top end of the rod, maintained 32 degrees. Sometimes it would drop down to about 31.5. The south end of the rod maintained an average temperature inside of 120 degrees. Now keep in mind, the vapor coming up there comes in below freezing, goes up to the top in a hot area, and now it's 32 degrees. Now in the southern hemisphere, when the tests were done down in Australia, they said that the temperature at the south end of the rod was 32 degrees, and at the north end averaged 120 degrees. The vapor coming in and hitting that rod is identical down here as it is up here. So why is the center of that rod so much different? Okay. Well, the rods that I left up here. Oh, okay. This, though, leads us to believe that we have some proof that the Earth does not have one single axis. It does have a north and south pole up here. And it has another north and south pole down here. So if North Pole right now has moved over towards Siberia, where is the bottom half of it? Maybe over here. But if the North Pole here has now shifted over here and the South Pole has shifted over here, how much would it take to really flip the axis? Not much. Had it been a full north to south, then it would take a tremendous amount of energy to flip a field that big. But it wouldn't take that much energy to flip two smaller fields. And if any of you were to take two magnets and put them together like this and check it with a compass, you're going to find north here and south here. You're not going to find a reading in here. This is what I believe we have with planet Earth, which would explain why every 25,000 years we get this flipping effect from something unknown to what we're doing here, but way out in our universe. Could it be the Milky Way or something beyond that? Yes, it could. Can we help to figure out how this works? By studying it? Yes, we could. Most universities don't want to talk about it, but the professors that work in those universities, one after another, have come forward saying, yes, I want to learn this. I want to know why this is occurring. The reason for that is later in our presentation. In 1999, we were not aware that by taking this rod, at that time we were still putting 3 little tips on it at each end so that it would hold it in the center of the chamber. We didn't realize that if we took the tips off, that this would hover, center itself, and spin at a high speed. So we thought we had to have it centered, which is why the plans we put out for free showed that. That was the original model for many years. It worked fine. But it limited what a GEET could do. It didn't create a full magnetic field at a high tension that the newer model does. So we were putting dye in to see if that would make a difference. Could we determine patterns on the rod? And when we put the dye in, we found a pattern that it would spin 3.14 times between north and south. Well, you don't think that messed us up? We didn't know which end was up. And what does that have to do with an engine running? Well, we didn't realize at the time either that this has nothing to do with the engine running. If you take those 3 tabs off, it goes a lot more than pi. We have found marks so close together that when you try to count them, you're looking at as many as a couple hundred marks in an inch. When you're dropping dyes in, and you have to use a heavy dye that has a high boiling point, but it will go through there and it'll leave a fingerprint right on that rod. And they are so fine. It's difficult to see. You have to use magnifying glasses to see them. But they're there. But now the question is it just the vapor spinning, or is it actually being accentuated by the rod spinning even faster? These are tests that I have yet to complete. And up at the ranch with Forrest, we're going to be setting up new shops, laboratories, test equipment. We're going to be able to check anything we want to check. And the problem is some of the things we need to check, the inventions haven't been made yet to test them. So we have to figure out how do we build something to test something that we don't understand. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to be looking for input from everybody in the world. And how do you get that kind of input? You give the plans away to everybody in the world to say, here, build one. Share your experience with us. And it's working. This one at first was a little scary. If you were to walk up to the GEET engine while it's running with a X-ray film in a steel cassette or aluminum cassette or even a paper cassette and hold it up like this next to the reactor rod while it's running, you're going to find your finger all down on that film from one side. From the other side, instead of seeing the fingernails and the skin tissue, you're going to see the bone of the thumb coming down, but you're not going to see the skin tissue. So it's 2 types of X-ray on one film. That hasn't been done yet in the medical field, but it's a really interesting challenge is why. So if this is up against the rod like this, something is coming out of the machine while something else is going into the machine. Well, the nice scientists at the University of Florida said what's coming in is electrons. Or is it? Just because they said it was an electron, does that make it an electron? Well, that goes back to the other question. If a laser beam pointed at the reactor pipe while it's running will show a spike in temperature when there really isn't one, we still use this to test the rod to see if it's working. Well, who says that that's an X-ray? It isn't. It's X-ray film. And with all the testing we've done, we can prove it develops that film. We can prove by putting 2 to 6 inches of lead on both sides of the film, and it still penetrates. But when the Nuclear Regulatory Commission was called on me and they came out and said, it's not alpha, beta, or gamma. It has nothing to do with anything we've ever heard of that's unsafe because it's a radio frequency. Well, radio frequency is a little easier to deal with. We have equipment that we can monitor with. We can adjust and calibrate this instead of having to use a compass, which is inaccurate in most cases. If we can use electronic equipment and that can tune it in to perfection, then we can make sure every engine we do will have a perfectly balanced rod for zero pollution. Before I go any further, are there any questions? No kidding, just left. I'm Paul. Do we have a microphone to pass up? Now, in groups of scientists, normally they'll say nothing during the whole presentation. They will just sit there and listen. They never have questions because none of them want to be exposed that I didn't know the answer to that. So it's a lot more fun having an audience that's down to earth and they're willing to ask questions. I love that. Go ahead.
Hello, Paul.
Hello.
Hello, Paul.
Not working.
Not working. Now? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Hello, Paul.
What are you doing to him?
No, it's okay. I have a question exactly where the energy is collapsing into and where exactly the energy is escaping from. Because it almost sounds like what Nassim talked about with a black hole happening someplace in there. You repeat the question? Right, it wasn't working. Oh, it is. All right, again for the cameras. I had a question about where the energy is escaping from any particular location and where the energy is collapsing into, because it sounds like what Nassim described as a black hole happening someplace in that tube and on that rod.
If while the engine is running, you have so much energy being pulled into this magnetic field that it goes to the south end and comes up to the north end, if you have the exhaust pipe insulated from the rest of the engine with an insulator, asbestos, there are several other things we've used, what will end up happening is all the excess electrons will flow out the end of the exhaust pipe and you'll end up with the aurora lights flashing out all the way across the top. The ball of white light that is anything in this field, which would also be this field, anything that is not needed to maintain a safe, healthy amount of energy is then dissipated back into the atmosphere around it. So do we have a black hole at this end? Well, if it hadn't been for this, we would. So this end, when you're running the engine, will get very dark. You can have a glass chamber built for you, and when it's running, the south end of the rod will become dark at the end. You will not be able to see through the glass chamber. The other end has a ball of white light. Does that answer your question?
Thank you, yes. What causes the thing to spin?
The spinning in the northern hemisphere and southern hemisphere, if the rod is horizontal, is the opposite. You have a right-hand, left-hand spin. But if it is biblical north, it will always spin upward to the north, clockwise.
Looking down or looking up?
Well, clockwise to the vacuum, clockwise to the north, always.
You're looking down at it would be clockwise.
No, looking up at it's clockwise, looking down at it would be counterclockwise.
The right-hand rule.
Right, correct.
Okay, hi, my name's Dominic, and I got a bunch of questions. One,
Oh, wait, do we have a limit on questions? No, go ahead.
one, you're talking about true north.
Yes.
If you took your tailpipe or whatever you got going, your GEET object here, and you pointed at true north, will your vehicle keep running?
If the tailpipe is pointed up and down?
If your rod and your GEET mechanism is pointed up true north, or
You mean
biblical
magnetic north,
biblical north.
biblical north. If you have an exhaust pipe coming off of any engine and you bend it downwards and then back out, during that downward motion, if that is where you're putting the reactor pipe, then it will run perfect at all times in all directions. If you have it in a horizontal position like this, you may be getting perfect burn driving north, but when you're heading south, you're only going to get a 95% increase in performance, not 100%.
So it won't affect your car going then?
Minimal.
Okay, then I had another question for you. You were talking about the bright light that comes when you've got glass casings for it.
Yes.
Okay, if this is a plasma-like light, and if you can put magnetite, if it's something akin to magnetricity, and if you can put magnetite in soil and grow crazy plants, what might happen if you put this tube over a greenhouse and used it for the light in lieu of sunlight in darker times of the year? Maybe you might be able to grow something crazy.
Why don't you take the free plans and let us know? Yes, Richard.
You know, Paul, there's certain times in life when you have one of those moments, and I'm sitting here having a moment, because everything you're describing is 100% torsion. You have created, apparently, the first cheap, easily reproducible torsion reactor. And you're dealing with the ether itself. You're dealing with the fabric of space-time. When you're looking at things coming and going simultaneously, that's the exchange between 3D and 4D and above. The increased energies, the efficiencies, the energy is obviously coming from hyperspace. You've got a hyperspace reactor here. No wonder they want to shut you down. Good God. I'm astonished that they've been as minimalist as they have. I mean, I was working to get you out, trying to get you, coverage on coast, and what was interesting to me is no one there was interested until you were out. Now,
Yeah.
I am doing a television network production which involves torsion physics this fall. I need to make a call tomorrow morning to the customer and tell him, in that old parlance, stop the presses, because I need to get you in this 2-hour special as a segment, which will do lots of things if I can pull this off. I may run into, are you nuts?
No, just say the guest is.
Probably, it'll be a little more difficult than one phone call, but I've been known to be rather persistent. So let's just obviously stay in close touch on that.
Absolutely.
Technically, I know why the hemispherical asymmetries. You need to look heavily at Nikolai Kozyrev's work. Planets are not built symmetrical, having nothing to do with the magnetic field. The magnetic field is all secondary. You have somehow tripped over the primary process of reality with a big capital R, and it's torsion. It's HD torsion. Nothing more, nothing less. What's cool is that there is a system here. Is Bill Alec in the audience? He left?
He's going to be at my home.
Okay. Because Bill has one of our torsion detectors here. I saw it on his table yesterday afternoon. The other one is back up at Enterprise, which means I would have to leave, and I'm not going to leave, to go get it.
Don't tell me Scotty has it on the Enterprise.
Scotty has it, yes. We use this, in fact, this is part of the special, we used it to measure the torsion field resonance of the pyramids of Teotihuacan and of Tikal. Had phenomenal results, actually blew everybody's mind, including the producer. We need to do a torsion field measurement of this system, and that will be an acid test. If it's doing what I think it is, we should get remarkable, reproducible results. I am rarely at a loss for words, Paul, and you have put me at a loss for words.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard. We haven't got to the good parts yet, Richard. I mean, you ought to see this baby when it's sitting on a scale that can go up to 300 pounds, but you're sitting there running the engine, and the faster you rev it up, the less it weighs.
Wow. Yeah.
I have another test for you.
We'll give it back to you. We need the mic.
What we need to do is to rig up a cradle so you have it in a pendulum. Because if I'm right, it's not just gravity, quote, that's affected, it's in inertial properties. It will swing differently and respond differently to an outside force when it's running than when it's not running.
Yes, and magnetic fields and gravity, everything does affect it. You're not the first person to ask about doing it on a pendulum. We have not done it yet, though. Close, but not yet. But I think we're getting real close. As soon as I have the new buildings up at the ranch, that will be one of the things we do want to test very quickly. But we also want to do it in all the different configurations, whether it's horizontal, vertical. We need to find all those parameters. During one of the tests, in a vertical position, I ran it out in the yard rather than in the house because I was doing some experiments with different kinds of fuels that I hadn't used before. And I revved the engine up, and for about an hour we were out there playing with it, and the snow all the way around me for 60 feet disappeared. Now, it didn't dawn on me at the time till one of my neighbors, Don Hill, was driving by, and he had to stop and look to see what I was doing, and he was scratching his head like, what on earth is that? Why would you get out there with a snow shovel and remove all the snow around where you're working that big if you only need this area? I didn't know about electrons being pulled back then 60 feet. I didn't understand that stuff. I just looked around after a little while realizing something happened. But why? I didn't know. Now, if it's pulling water and it's pulling electrons, what should it be doing to me? I'm not growing any extra parts. I feel great. I like it, so I'm going to keep doing it. We've run these engines in closed rooms where one of my mechanics was running it in the room because it was raining outside, and he didn't want to endanger himself, so he put the analyzer in the room and turned it on so he could monitor the air. Well, after 8.5 hours, I came back from work that evening, and I went out. I heard the engine running, and he's not in the backyard, he's not in the side yard, and I realized he's in my office. So I walk in, I smoke, and I walk in the office, and first thing he said is, "Oh, put that cigarette out." So I got it out of the room. If one cigarette bothered this guy that bad, and he's been in the room for 8.5 hours, what's the machine say? So I went over and I looked at the monitor, and it was showing 23.5% oxygen in the room. I said, we need to open the window before the oxygen level gets up too high. No hydrocarbon, no carbon monoxide, no carbon dioxide. Now, we've joked about tinkle in the tank, it works. Well, you know what? If I was in a spaceship and I really had to go, it'd be nice to know that's called fuel. And it's getting me where I got to go. And there's no waste. So it has a lot of other properties that we're not going to go into all of those because we didn't print them all up. But one of the other phenomenon that we had, which is important for aircraft and other toys, was when we were running the 350 Chevy engines on our generators, we noticed how quiet and vibration-free they were. Now, these aren't blueprinted balanced engines. These are just junk engines. We were testing. And we put a glass of water on one day. I was drinking it and set it down, and the guy went over and he was doing some other work, and he hit the button, started it up. And I looked over, and there's a glass of water still sitting on top of the engine, but you can see it going pink, 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 right to the center, and little waves going out to the edge of the glass. So I picked up the glass, and I said, boy, that's smooth. So I took a nickel out of my pocket and put it on top of the engine, and I watched it for about 30 seconds before it finally rolled off. It didn't fall over, it rolled off. The engines are that smooth. Well, any of you who've ever built a car engine knows you cannot idle it down to 50 or 80 RPM smoothly. It's going to be rocking and rolling. But with the GEET on there, it was burning in the dead center of every single stroke. So there was no vibration in that piston. It wasn't firing at 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, twisting all over the place. That means you really don't need wrist pins, and you don't really need all the rings in there and the rest of that stuff because it's not twisting. So we didn't understand why that worked until the Cambridge laboratory, who got one of our engines, did their own testing, and they told us what they found. So again, we are so grateful that when the technology has been shared with a few people here and there, that they've taken the time to do the testing and call us up and tell us what the results are. When we start comparing these results to all the other results we've got all over the world, we're now coming up with good, solid ways of putting other people's products together with this, or at least the knowledge we've gained from this, so that we can advance other fields. Any more questions? Yes?
Got a question there?
Did you have a question? No. We've already hit this one. Now here's another one that's really funny. When you put the rod in there the first time, if you start out with a 12-inch rod and you've got enough room in the chamber to do it, you take it out and you check it with a compass. Now, it's always best to test the rod in the exact direction it was when it was running in the engine. You check it with a compass. If the needle swings over and points to the rod, you mark it. When you go down the rod, the other end of it swings over, you mark it. That's how long the rod is telling you. It's smart. It has an aura. The aura is healthy. So if the aura is healthy at 6 inches, it'll tell you, from here to here, that's how long I want to be. I don't want to be any longer. So now you make another rod that exact length. It'll go from there to there. You put it in there, and it's going to run healthy, a beautiful blue aura. Now, if the rod couldn't get close enough to the engine, there's something blocking it, or there's an elbow right there, and you're a little too far away from the heat, it'll stop it from going any further. At that point, you either have to insulate that fitting so that the heat is transferred down a little bit more, or change the direction the rod's coming so it can get closer to the heat. It's telling you it really wanted to go from there to here, not where you got it. So when you pull that rod out and check it with the compass, there's nothing out here at the end, but all of a sudden that needle goes bang, and you're sitting there looking at the needle jumping around, there's nothing there. Oh, there is something there, energy. It's telling you exactly how long it wants to be healthy. And if it's healthy, the exhaust coming out the tailpipe is going to be healthy.
Paul,
Yes,
do you know about Pantone leaves on beryllium photography?
that's one of our first pictures we looked at.
That's what you do?
Yes,
It's etheric. It's in the ether.
yes.
Yes.
It tells you when it's healthy, and it tells you when it's not healthy. If the rod is too tight or too narrow in the gap, it'll tell you by the color of the beryllium photography around it. And if it's got an orange color to it, you're way too loose. You're not getting a good clean burn. The dark, dark black almost instead of the dark blue means give it a little bit more space. But it will tell you exactly what's wrong with it. You don't have to be a scientist. You just have to look at a picture going, okay, blue is healthy, red is not. And it's pretty obvious.
Can I get one to beta test?
I think you could. As soon as we start cranking them out at the shop, I'll be happy to send you a few. This one used to drive me nuts when I was a kid. My brother also, Rocky and I had watched Mom go in there to make pasta. And instead of starting out with hot water, she'd always say, oh, no, 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 you got to start out with cold water. Cold water boils faster. That was my reaction. Yeah, Ma, okay. My brother had the same feeling. Yeah, Ma, right. But she'd do it. And we'd have dinner was when it was done. And when she wanted to make ice cubes, oh, let that water run till it's good and hot. That makes a better ice cube faster. Okay, Mom, yep. Well, in my little pea brain, I was thinking hot water is going to boil faster and cold water is going to freeze faster, Mom. But I didn't want to argue with her. I mean, she was a great lady. So I always smiled and said, yes, Mom. Then I find out we've got people out there that are heating up the fuel to get it into the reactor. Well, if you want to have a plasma reaction, you want to go from as cold as possible to as hot as possible, as quickly as possible. Then you get a lightning storm. When a cold and a hot mass of air collide, you get lightning. If they're flat and they're coming down on each other, you get sheet lightning. So the energy release is from cold to hot, hot to cold, as quickly as possible to get a discharge. And what she told me back then, I didn't believe, until I got a little older. Then I found out the colder that fuel is going in there, the faster it gets to the point of total separation in a ball of white light. And that ball of white light can be really exciting. So some of you who have come to me today and yesterday said, hey, I built it with a bubbler and I superheated the... No. Get it ice cold. The colder it is, the better. And how much temperature differential does it take to achieve a plasma type reaction? Oh, 10, 20, 30 degrees. It doesn't take much. But to maintain it and create that ball of white light, the more heat you have and the more cold you have in opposite direction, the more intense it's going to be. When you get it to the point that that white light can't stay in that chamber anymore and it comes outside the chamber, you're at usually 3 times or 4 times the RPM of the engine. But when you get it to that point, you can shut that fuel off. You're going to wait 10 minutes before the engine decides it's going to stop because you've got so much plasma built up in there that it can't just stop quickly. So you want to have a way of maintaining it when you're building it to be able to kill the vacuum completely by opening up the air valve as quick as you can to the engine to kill the engine. Otherwise, it's just going to keep running. We're not going to go into all the bubbler effects because it would take as long to go through all the bubbler effects as it would be to go through all of the different rod reactions and why and how. But there are as many ways to build a bubbler as there are pieces of equipment. But the one thing you've got to remember when you're building them, if you do want to build one, is don't fill the bottom of it up more than 1/3. Key number 1. Number 2 is the vapor coming from the inside of that chamber all the way to the bottom is spinning in one direction. The minute it hits the bottom, it goes back up in the opposite direction. And when you have opposites like that, they create electrical fields. So as it's coming up, it is spinning clockwise into the vacuum, and it's going to naturally be spinning off clockwise coming out at the top. So if you want to pick up the maximum velocity as it's achieving going to the reactor, you want to come off that side panel like that. When you do, you've got maximum velocity, and it takes that rod for a real fast spin. Now, we've made glass rods where we could look inside it, and we scratched one of the glass pieces with sandpaper and put black, can't think of what kind of paint that was, like a fingernail polish, but we left it on there and then cleaned it off so that you could see the rod spinning. There was no way we could even try to calculate how fast it was going. But 30 minutes after we shut the engine off, you could still see the rod was spinning. 30 minutes later. So, what is the speed of the rod? We don't know yet.
Well, have you tried stroboscopic
No,
photography?
no.
That's the way to do it.
Well, I've always had a budget just good enough where I could afford to be on a road trip and showing people and running the dog and pony show. That's why I said this is it. This is it. I'm going home. We're setting up 4 more classes. We only have a few more spots. Once those 4 classes are filled, we're setting up cameras. We're filming it. And that's the only way anyone in the future is going to get a class for a long time. Because I need to be in the laboratory. I need to have a dozen of you helping me with directions of, hey, test this, do that, try this. We need this kind of input. We have a few ladies that are coming in that are scientific that want to help in this area. And I'm sure they can come up with some great ideas on, can we test this, can we test that? I want to pick everyone's brain as we're doing it. If you've got an idea for something, no matter how silly it is, I want to hear it. I got tired of hearing it the first few years I was on the road, and I'd have all these scientists with their PhDs stacked up, some of them with 3 and 4 PhDs, and they'd sit there with the same question day after day at the different shows. And I finally decided I was going to have some fun with these PhDs. So I had made up a list of the 25 tests that needed to be done. And I said, well, see if anybody here disagrees with any of this, and I'd read them off real quick.
You need to go on Letterman.
No, this isn't it. This is just a prop. This is just a prop. But as I'd read down the list, I'd always get to the middle one, and it'd say, a suspensometric evaluation. And they don't, yeah. I made it up. It sounded good. Sure got them good because they were afraid to talk. But I got so tired of being picked on by some of these guys with so many PhDs that I didn't have, and I finally found out the easiest way to shut them up. I'd ask them which end is north here, hold the compass up, they'd see it's north. The flat end is always north, right? Yeah, that's what the guy'd agree, because he could see it with a compass. He'd test the other end, it'd be south, and I'd have him mark it with a pen. Then I'd turn the rod over and say, where's north? They'd always point down here. I'd take the compass out and show them, north is up here. South is down here. Compass doesn't lie. Flip it over again, where's north? They'd always be pretty reluctant by the third time. But I would always ask the audience, because the audience heard me saying, north is always up, biblically speaking. So no matter how many times you turn this field around or your human body around, flipping it end for end, this is always north if you're standing up. If you are upside down and inverted and your head is touching the ground, your feet become north. It realigns your body. But people don't know that, so we don't want to tell them things they don't know. It'll confuse them. Another bubbler. Basic information is the same thing. Here's a fun one. We said we're not going to really talk much about the bubbler for good reason. The bubbler was a way of getting publicity. I could pour pickle juice, Mountain Dew, anything in there, and people could see something happening. That's the worst way in the world to run fuel. You know how hard it is to get that thing maintained? It isn't worth it. It's easier to build our own new style of carburetor that's just a couple little tiny jets. You adjust those, start it up, and it goes. Or you can use injectors. If you've already got 6, 8, or 10 injectors under the hood, disconnect them all. Just take the wires off and hook 1 or 2 up to a block like this so it just feeds it right into the reactor line. So when your engine starts up, you've got one of these pulsing all the time. The other one is for the accelerator if you want extra power. The rest of the wires, just tape them off. You don't need all the rest of it. Keep it simple. But these systems won't allow you use. You can't use pickle juice, Mountain Dew, and stuff like that. You can't use crude oil in this. It'll plug it up. But how many people in this room have crude oil on the corner? None. And if you started using pickle juice and stuff like that, which would be outrageously expensive, you know what that would do to the cost of pickles? So stick to what you have available. If you want to build a dual reactor rod, which we're going to show you here in just a sec, build it dual, so you can run half water and half gas if you want, or 80% water. But remember, the minute you put that on the road, the government's going to tell you that's a no-no. Now, this is one of the 7 unidentified fields of energy, because when one occurs, all 7 occur simultaneously. In this Gauss field, Dr. Hal Fox and a few of his scientists came in. They were trying to figure out what they could make of this. They kept looking at it, saying, how come when we get within just this close range, you know, a foot or 2 away, we got this field, and they're just like the Van Allen belts. When we get out further, we have that same exact field that you find out there 10 or 20,000 million miles away, that we can only imagine what it is, and here we get to play with it. So all the things that are happening plasma-wise that you can see, astrophysics outside our universe, we now get to play with in the backyard. Why aren't the universities wanting to do this in the backyard? They want to do it privately. Every scientist I've met wants to play with these things in their own home, in their own garage. They don't want it part of the university. We haven't figured out why, but that's life. Again, this is the sensor. When that pyrometer light is pulled in right there at that center, that machine tells us, hey, you just got a 400-degree spike, and it's not there. But we do have a way of reading that something is happening there. Now, what is it? I can't identify it, so it's called another one of the unidentified fields of energy. And you'll notice throughout the whole thing, none of it says Paul Pantone's or Pantone's. No, it doesn't. It's just, it's GEET. It's for mankind. Now, we also found another interesting thing, that when you've got an ammeter or an ohm meter, it's even funnier. If you've got an ohm meter and you just walk by the unit, all of a sudden you'll see that thing just peg out. And I've had electricians walk by and just look at it and back up and go, can't do that. For an ohm meter to read, you've got to go around it like this. Just passing it in the area can't make it read. Well, what it can do and what it can't do is two different things. But what is it really reading? We haven't figured that out.
Ether.
We haven't had an ether meter yet. Okay, this one we're going to pass up. It's something we teach with the bubblers in school. This again is bubblers in school. I will hit one issue on here. During our bubblers, we were making them out of aluminum. I personally wanted to know what was going on inside, so I took a drinking glass. And I made a round circle in the bottom, and I put the drinking glass up there with a gasket, and we drilled 3 holes in the bottom with a little harness to hold the glass in place, and we filled it up. We were running it on gas that day. I had about 9 mechanics in the classroom, and when they saw that tornado come down to the bottom of the glass, they started backing up a little because they could see little lightning bolts. They ran to the door so fast. They were terrified that lightning in gasoline means boom. It's a good thing they didn't see what was in the reactor pipe. That would have scared them. There's a dual reactor. This can be built on any vehicle or piece of equipment I'm sorry, that has an exhaust pipe. Simply split the exhaust pipe so you have 2 exhaust pipes that recombine later or continue as single. And then one can be set up for gasoline or diesel. The other one can be set up for just water. Now, if you're running water, you don't want to go above 80, 90% water. It's really frowned on. If you put a car on the road that's running on any water, the states all say you cannot do it except Kentucky. Kentucky said, we don't care if you're running on a little water, just PSR 16.8 cents a gallon. So if you live in Kentucky, you can pay for the water, get a receipt, and then if you get stopped, you got a receipt for the water. Makes it legal. Now, on that great big engine that I modified, we spent $95,000, $98,000 on, it had huge exhaust pipes like this coming out of it. And we're talking 4-inch exhaust. And we tried to put the reactor inside like this, and it would not work. We tried the pipe being 24 feet long because we calculated it, figuring if this one's this big, then the big engine has to be this big. We wasted a ton of money, a lot of effort to find out that if 7 inches is the size of the rod for a little engine, that's the size it is for a semi-locomotive, it doesn't matter. We have spent 30 years building up the formula so that other people now don't have to. We've also made the mistake so you don't have to. Okay, this unit has been renamed. It's a, we can build a small 1-horsepower engine that instead of modifying a great big diesel, we can just bring in a little engine like this and hook it up where the vapor from this one is running the big engine. So you don't need to modify the big engine anymore. Now I'm going to bring it back to this when we're all done. These are the lengths you'd need if it's vertical, horizontal, or diagonal. These are the different types of fuel and how long the rods should be. Everything is by fuel type, the clearances, everything you need to know for the basic plans is on this one page. And I know several of you came up yesterday and were writing them all down. But we're going to leave it up a little longer tonight. I hope this is one of the last pieces of equipment they yank down. But now, we're not going to go into this other than to say, as a furnace, it has some phenomenal things happening. But when you're building this as a furnace, the bottom 1/3 of that chimney pipe will have ice on it. So to have a furnace, you're going to end up with 30-degree waste that you don't need. But unless, of course, you need a refrigerator or a freezer or something somewhere else on the property. In the center section where the reaction occurs is a heavy field of electrical output. That needs to be tapped into by one of the people who build coils already. We've got to try every kind of coil we can until we hit the right one. The top 1/3 of the chimney has no heat at all. It's ambient air temperature. But when you get up about 8 to 12 inches above that baby, you got yourself a hot flame. Now the flames coming out of these furnaces are so pure, there is no color to them. You can only see the outline of a flame. There is no yellow, no orange, and no blue. It's just a perfect burn. It's extremely hot. So you have to have reinforced materials to place above it so that you can use it for heat extraction to finally get to do the heating you want. But in the meantime, you have all this waste electricity and waste air conditioning. It's hard to call it waste, but it is. You can also run it, whether you're running it for a furnace, a gas engine, a diesel engine, it can be run off of any kind of liquid. It can be run off the septic tank vapors. It can be run off wood, coal, just about anything you can imagine. Building an airtight wood stove where it only pulls the air from the bottom and circulates through the coal or tires. A Toyota tire will last about, $48, be longer than that now. Probably more like about $55, $60 worth of gas in equivalents. So the old tire you're throwing out that you paid $20 for brand new, that you can't get rid of except to pay $5, is still worth about $50 to you just in fuel. And the waste product from that is the high quality steel that you can recycle. When you're burning coal, we have several pictures of people who have burned coal. Zero pollution. Even high sulfur coal has zero pollution. There have been many people all over the world that have tried wrapping it with electrical devices, wires, you name it, it's been tried, but not enough. We need more trying. One of the later pictures is going to explain what I mean when I say this is nothing. I mean, drawing off even 120 or 240 volts is nothing compared to what it has in it. We have tried building the rods because some people said try titanium, try this, try that. Can we machine your rods out for you? You can waste all the money you want building them out of the most exotic materials you can, or just go down to the hardware store. This comes in 3-foot lengths. Just whack off the size you need. That's good enough. So if you'd rather spend $80 to $150 to have it made by your machinist buddy, go for it. Or go down and spend 30 cents and you'll get the same job done. Again, this just shows that the quality of air should always match the exhaust to the intake. They should be at least the same. In most cases, the oxygen level coming out the tailpipe is better. This is just a recap of everything else we've hit, except here we do mention that to get an efficient burn, you want to be between 7 and 11 inches of vacuum. So always maintain a vacuum in that chamber for maximum efficiency. Now, some of the guys like Dennis Lee and others have thought, well, we'll get around Paul, and we're not going to call it GEET, we're going to call it TEAG. We're going to take that picture you have in the classroom, and we're going to go build one here that we can put inside the muffler, the catalytic converter or whatever, strap it beside it. They don't work. You'll get minimum efficiency, but if that's what you want to do, hey, go for it. We have a lot of other models that don't work. We also had people saying, well, we're going to wrap coils around it. Well, the problem with that is the condensation ends up filling the bottom of the coils. We've never seen anything there work. Nothing can work that long in a good vacuum. We've also had many people, including the people we have working with us right now in a few other countries, that have been using plastic lines too close to the reactor pipes. If you're using plastic or rubber, anything that can melt within even 10 to 12 inches of that exhaust pipe, when you shut the engine off, the heat's going to transmit outward and melt your pipes. So don't use it. Don't take a chance on anything that might hurt you. It doesn't cost but a few cents more to do it right. Back to the bubbler again. This is something that my son came to me with. Anytime you're building anything that uses fuel, you want to have a piece of brass or stainless steel screen between the fuel that could detonate and anything that can spark, because flame will not travel through a screen. Well, I looked up all the patents I could from all over the world, and there were stacks of them. All these inventors spent all this money patenting, putting a screen under a carburetor so they could get better mileage. And I read every one of them for all their claims, and I came up with a different way of doing it, and mine worked. I didn't know why it worked, it just worked. It didn't work in all cases, but most cases. One day my son's out there playing, he says, "Hey Dad, look at this." He's got a can of WD-40. And as he squirted it, and it went straight through, almost nothing happened. But when he held it at about a 45-degree angle and went like this, it came out like cigarette smoke. I was like, oh. All these other people, none of us realized it was the angle of the screen that made it work. It wasn't 2 layers thick or 3 layers thick or brass, stainless steel, copper charging it. It was something so simple as just the angle. Now, am I missing that in here too somewhere? I don't know. Maybe there's one more invention or discovery that we're going to have tonight that I didn't know an hour ago. That's going to change things again. But we're always going to move forward in it. So sometimes it's the smallest detail, something that is so simple that nobody sees it. Now the other thing, which first episodes of Star Trek really destroyed us in the movies, because we see this ship take off and you hear the sound. Sorry folks, there's no sound in space. In a vacuum there is no sound. Well, when you do a totally closed loop engine, if you took this engine here and looped all the exhaust back around to the air intake and started it up, you cannot hear the engine run. There's no exhaust going puff, puff, puff. But you can, from here, you can hear the piston going up and down. You can hear the valves. But you don't really hear the engine running. Now, when you do that on a lawnmower and you're out there cutting your lawn Sunday morning and blowing leaves everywhere, the neighbors are going to stand there scratching their head because they can't hear anything but the birds. We had some neighbors up there in Salt Lake that they didn't want to talk to us because of all the weird things they saw around our property. But that one pushed them over the edge. Yeah, right, a lawnmower with a gas engine that doesn't make sound. Right. But some people don't want to advance. They don't want to learn. They're happy where they are today. Electricity, here we go now. We're getting close to the good one. Electricity travels straight in a vacuum. If you take a Jacob's ladder, you see it jumping up and down as it travels up the ladder. In that vacuum, it goes straight across. You also have sound here. Over there, you don't. Now, how does sound and electricity, what is the correlation there that's happening in this engine? Because when this is made out of glass and you're watching it, you'll see lightning bolts shooting back and forth in there. And a ball of white light. No sound. Sure is a good light show. Is there any sound in there? No. Sure would be interesting, though, to hear what that sounds like, because we all know what lightning sounds like. Well, I took it a few stages beyond that, and we did find out what lightning felt like. That one's coming. If you cannot kill the vacuum at the engine, and it gets a runaway on you, and you've got it going too fast, you need to have an air opening at the engine where you can open it up, let air in to kill the vacuum. Otherwise, it can just keep running and running and running until it runs out of plasma. This, again, is the temperature changes that we've witnessed, as well as universities in France, where they detected this temperature change inside, not on the outside, but this was the reading on the inside. So is it possible that our reading the outside is actually being pulled all the way into this chamber? Anything is possible. But they were able to document that we're getting these fantastic changes. Well, if the vapor coming in here is below freezing, and just going around the rod, it jumps up and then drops as it gets hotter, what is happening? It's when that first expansion and it's atomically ripped apart, there's a heat field. Then it drops in temperature and it expands again and again and again all the way to the end, till it goes to a ball of white light. Who knows what the middle one is? I don't. Oh, here's a fun one. Now, Richard, this one I think you'd like to see too. As you're running the engine at different speeds past normal, you'll start seeing little fields of electrical disturbance. Sometimes it's just little lightning bolts. Sometimes you'll see plasmoids. They're little tiny red dots that shoot out the side of the metal and just go crazy in about 1.5 inch to 2 inch area. They start and stop in maybe 2 seconds. But electrical energy that can't move in a straight line. It goes out and does 180s and it does loop-de-loops and twists itself in knots and disappears. That one has never been seen with the naked eye before, according to the scientists we talked to in the plasma department at UCLA. They were so eager to get in a plane and fly up, they were at my house that night in Salt Lake. They came down to see if they could film it. The problem they had filming it was their high-speed cameras weren't high enough speed, and he said, there's no reason we should be able to see it with the naked eye then. But we were. And we were able to hold glass and aluminum, polished aluminum, up against them and watch it etch the glass and etch the aluminum. They said that the best they've seen in their microscopes, that is a plasmoid by its movement. But they've never seen one with their naked eye. The last one is the one we did with Gordon Hormel at his mansion. We lit the whole room up. It also scared a few of the scientists because how do you create that much light, a ball of light, outside of a piece of equipment with no protection? Well, they chose not to see it again when I offered to rerun that demonstration that night. They said, oh, no, we've seen enough. That's fine. So sometimes fear can be a good thing, I think. Here's the one that makes everybody smile. This happened up in Idaho. All of our students that come to school will take an engine like this, put the parts on it, and they run it. We always teach them, for safety's sake, you take the engine outside the first time you ever start anything in case you have a fuel leak or anything else go wrong. Well, it was raining outside. So they take the engine outside, and that blue board got good and wet, and a lot of moisture in the air, and they're running it, and a few minutes later, one of them comes running into my office, and he says, you got to come out here right now. We're causing tornadoes. What? Well, I drop what I'm doing. I go running out that door right behind him. And underneath it, there's a little tornado. Well, you could see the rippling effect on the water that was on the board. And it was about a 5-inch circle, and it got a little smaller and smaller. And then all of a sudden, it started coming up off the board a little. And then you can see the sheet coming up to it. Oh, wow, this is neat. And as one...
Etheric, torsion, vortex.
all the way around it, but you can only see it when light's a certain color. But these were visible for the first time. So here I am getting more and more excited. I go over and grab, because they don't quite touch the rod. They come right up to it. They don't touch the ground. They spin the air downward and upward so close to the ground that it rips everything apart around it. This is the same thing happening in reverse. I can see the clouds being formed and coming up to it. It's going really great, but they don't touch the ground. I get a piece of coat hanger. I go out there like this, and I take the coat hanger, and wham! I'm back about 15 feet on my butt. My hair is standing straight out, and I got black fingernails. Whoa, that's a jolt. So you think putting 110 volts out of that's something? No. Trying to harness that's going to be more fun. That's why I said I need coils. I need every kind of coil we can try. There is some power there. We filmed 42 tornadoes coming off that baby in about 30 minutes. I immediately took the camera out of that film and said, I don't want anybody even seeing this. It gets locked up. Now, I've watched a lot of discovery shows where they've said they have no way on earth to test in a laboratory how a tornado is formed and how they can play with it or study it. There's nothing out there. And I'm sitting there going, yes, there is. But who do I want to do that testing? I want somebody that trusted me enough to want to come to my class and said, can I be the person testing it? Because I want them to get some credit for this too. If we're going to work with people, we want it to be the people we want to work with. I don't want to go knock on their door and say, will you please work with me? No, I had enough of it. I want the people that come to us are the ones that want to be with us, who want to be part of this grassroots movement, getting it out to mankind. So whether you're in Australia, Europe, wherever you are, we've got to get it out there. Yes?
Is that compression on the diagram accurate? It starts out large and it gets smaller?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, and the same thing from the top. If you're looking at it from the air, as long as you've got moisture in the air, fog, and you cut through there with a light with paper on both sides so you've got a bar of light going through it, You can see the tornadoes all the way around it on a foggy day. Hmm?
A guy in Australia named Reginald Kagan is going to absolutely flip when he sees this.
Okay.
Maybe he won't see it.
Well, if he's from down under, he'd be seeing the other side first. Come on. No. I want to replicate all of these things one video at a time and then find the best way to release them. And I want to have a lot of fun doing it. So this is the basic part of GEET. Okay, that's it. Questions and answers. Can we turn the lights on the other way?
Okay, he's got questions. Anybody got any answers? Okay. Now you want to do the Q&A before you show, just explain the motors and everything? Or would you like to do the Q&A after?
Q&A first.
Q&A. Give us your name and address your questions to Paul.
Kent Williams. Now, what size, on a 1600 engine, what size carburetor would you use?
What is that equal to in a, let's see.
60 horsepower.
Oh, you get away with the half inch. You're going to be using about a 6 to 8 horsepower Tecumseh or Briggs & Stratton.
Okay. Now, I noticed on your split reactor, I was thinking that I would have one for
Wait, I do
one on
need
2
to fix
cylinders.
Back. The clicker I gave it to John. I'm sorry. John, do you have the clicker?
Got it.
Oh, mouse, whatever that's called. I'm sorry, go ahead.
On that your split reactor where you use water and fuel, I was Mike and I were discussing what we would do on the old Volkswagen, is have one on 2 cylinders and one on another 2 cylinders, but we don't need that. We can run it into one carburetor, right?
One carburetor will do it.
All right.
No, one for water, one for gasoline. Sorry.
And being mixed in that carburetor, there's no problem.
No, you can't mix them in the carburetor. You have to mix them after they've gone through the reactor. Water has to go through one reactor.
Yeah, that's what I
after the
mean.
other.
But after they come out of the reactor,
After
they can
come
go
out of
through
the
one
reactor, one tube all the way.
in one.
Right. Once it's been turned into the GEET gas, all the way.
Okay. Thank you.
Hey, Paul.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, when you were showing the tornado,
Yep.
is that while it's vertical or horizontal?
That's a horizontal unit.
On a horizontal unit, what would happen if it's vertical?
When you do it vertical and you cut boxes with slots in it so you can see the light through it, on a foggy night, you'll see the tornadoes all the way around it.
Oh, wow. Cool.
Now, they only go for the area of the equator, the center of where the rod is.
My name is Adam Compton. I noticed on the reactor, to connect to the engine, you have copper pipes. Now, what happens in terms of like the dielectric properties of cathode anode, like with zinc and steel, copper and steel? Most people say, well, you don't do that, but obviously you're doing it here. How does that play out?
It's never made any effect one way or another.
Hey, Paul, Roger. I'm just thinking of the Tesla turbine presentation we saw yesterday, and they can actually throw solids into it, which I thought was very cool. And then you had your tying in the wood stoves, you could put a tire in.
Right.
And I'm thinking, is any of the fuel, like, I mean, clearly you can use a gas, you can also use a liquid. Have you ever, I guess first question would be, any solids you'd ever put through, and what would be good? Well, I guess pickle juice doesn't burn very well, so you're even using that. So, but yeah, have you ever tried solids, I guess?
Like tires and coal, or what do you mean solids?
Coal dust.
No need to.
But
we take
I'm
the-
saying, have you tried it yet?
No, I haven't.
Okay, haven't tried it yet.
No.
Okay, all right. So, could be a good experiment, right?
Nevada Power wanted us to do that, but they weren't willing to pay for it.
Paul, I'd like to propose surreptitious lying to the Department of Energy. And what I'd like to look at long term is this reactor rod would take the carbon emissions of every coal-fired power plant on the planet to zero.
Yep.
And there are lots of people that would really like that, including people that are politically powerful. That includes all the people that dig up coal. But making the technology work in your way is politically unpopular. I propose that we lie our butts off. And the way this works is, we make a proposal to the Department of Energy and we say we can sequester CO2, and we say we're going to do it in this weirdo way. And it's going to be like, we're going to make weirdo clathrates. They're going to be physically stable, and we're going to sequester coal like, CO2 like crazy. And they'll give us like a little bit of dough, and we run it through this, and we get these terrific results, and we lie our butts off, and we say, hey, it works like gangbusters, and oh, by the way, there's this little piece of tubing in the system. And since I have, quite a bit of experience doing Department of Energy projects, I'm just proposing to you that there might be a way to lie our butts off. It isn't so much that we're going to...
If you know of anybody who can hypothetically do such a thing, or they should get a license from me that would give them permission to do what they need to get products out and send me my 3%, so I don't know what they're doing.
There's so much money in this, you really don't have to worry about that. What we're really doing is we are taking technology above the visibility level of the political system so that by the time, see, we're playing dumb. We know it works, gee, and we think it's this clathrate reaction when in fact there's something else going on. And by the time the political system understands what's really going on, we're going, gee, we didn't realize that was, so at any rate, let's get a team together.
Okay, we need to make a comment here. You have to kind of question the mentality and the mental demographic of somebody who uses the term proposing and lying their butts off. It's that much in one statement, okay? But
No, he's not an attorney.
well, he could be a suitor, but he doesn't come from San Francisco. But the truth of it is that RC States holds not one piece of wallpaper, but multiple pieces of wallpaper. One of them comes from MIT. He is an electrical engineer with an incredible pedigree. And that man, I just want to take a moment to recognize him among the many others that are here that I can see that spent a great amount of time. And he's one of those people that for 3 or 4 years did not take a Saturday off without spending not one, but quite a few hours working with the defense project to help get Paul out. And that man is incredibly intelligent. And if you're concerned, if you have an electrical engineering idea or project, or if you're concerned about the electromagnetic field around this, that maybe Paul isn't prepared to give you a straightforward answer because he doesn't completely understand it. And Paul, if he doesn't completely understand it, he'll tell you, I don't understand it. He's very straightforward about it. He says, it works. I may not understand it all the way, but it does work. RC States may know a little bit more about filling in that gap, and I'd like to have a little round of applause for Rob States here. Okay, Charlie.
Hey, John, one comment. If that guy lies his butt off to get done with this, he's got to go to confession afterward.
Did you guys get that? He says if he lies his butt off, he's got to go to confession afterward. So does that mean like if the ends justifies the means?
Go ahead.
Paul,
Yes.
excuse my ignorance, but on the clearance that you have written there, is that the clearance between the rod and the edge of the tube, or is that total clearance on both sides? You follow me? In other words, on a gas rig, half-inch rod in the middle and a half-inch gas pipe, you're going to have 0.0625 inches. That's the gap between the rod and the pipe, or is that both sides added together? You following what I'm saying?
No, I'm not.
Over here on the right-hand side, you have rod clearance by fuel types. Yeah.
Yeah, if somebody converted it all on that chart to,
Yeah.
For gasoline, you want about 1/8 of an inch. For natural gas, about a 32nd.
About all the way
On
around.
both sides.
On both sides.
Top and bottom.
This distance on both sides.
Yeah.
Now the next question is, if I am using...
Remember, I'm a carpenter, not a machinist.
if I'm using one reactor, one rod, and I'm using a 350 engine, and I don't want to do a dual rod configuration, I can increase the diameter of the center rod.
To 3/4 inch, yeah.
And then but then I also have to obviously increase the diameter of the outside tube.
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
One quick note, Paul said, I'm not a machinist, I'm a carpenter, this gentleman's in front of you here. He actually built one of his carburetors, the base and everything out of wood, and it ran. So much for the carpenter. Round of applause for Paul.
Real quick before you hit your question, if you can hold on. Steve Ellswick said that he does have plans here for sale for anyone who wants to get the license. The plans now that used to be $250, he is still selling them, so you have a license at $150, which means you're still entitled to get a hold of me by email to get questions answered. And any license beyond the first one for your own personal use is $50 each. But for that, you have to Steve TeslaTech. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Paul. I'm still stuck on the idea of etheric energy expressed as light. So I'm curious if you could repeat for me again how you achieved getting a ball of light on the outside of your chamber. Was that what you were saying happened?
Yes.
How did that happen?
When the atmospheric conditions are right, there's enough moisture in the air, the light becomes visible on the outside. It requires to have something for the light to affix to.
On your reactor wad, if you know the given length, shall we say, is 2.5 inches, how long is the reactor rod on the outside, or doesn't it make any difference, or does it find the center by itself?
It automatically will pull itself to the center, it will hover, and it will spin. All natural movement.
Okay, good, thank you. Very good.
Okay. Well, Paul, do you have any closing comments, or would you like to do the show and tell on the, just point out what we're looking at here? Grab your laser pointer.
Well, yeah, the laser pointer will do, because right now...
Hey, I can just put my finger on it. What do I need the laser pointer for? Okay.
Okay. This is the air intake right here.
1 second, let me get up on the screen. Will you put it on the screen? No.
Which one of us is... Is that you or me?
No, I think it was me, but in the unlikely event, I'll babysit yours.
They want it on the screen.
Oh, okay.
That
And
one,
the monkey pushes the
Thank
button,
you.
the right-hand one. Yes. Okay, there we are.
Okay.
Good point, thank
You
you.
have an air intake, you can barely see it right there, and that valve will allow you to put just fresh air right into the top of the cylinder as fast as possible. Down below, down here, we have a valve that allows fresh air to be pulled through the tube down the center of the jar all the way to the bottom of the jar. In the bottom of the jar, we do have a stainless steel pot scrubber. That is mine. That's mine.
Go ahead.
The stainless steel pot scrubber in here and most of the contents in here was last used 4 years ago at the Tesla conference in Salt Lake. What?
This looks too familiar.
This was the one that was used to demonstrate for Sterling Allen out in front of the Larry H. Miller Center.
Should we give it a pull?
Well, I gather you're going to go ahead and yank. So, oh wait, yeah, let's get the electronics off.
I think
No, let's get the electronics
Why
off.
don't you use this one? Just use this one. That'll electronic reaction.
No, that may be interfering in the field when you start the engine.
Unless
you want to take
You know, this mic doesn't have the same challenges that that one does. So that one needs to be shut off. You got a good point. Pardon? I may have run these once or twice. Yeah. Okay. You want to give it a pull or shall I?
I'll let you do it.
Okay. Visor ready?
Yep.
Oh, drat, it doesn't work.
In case any of you haven't started your lawnmower up in your living room, it normally does have a little black smoke.
By the way, when we ran this in our hotel room last year, the O2 content on our meter was 4% higher. Normally ambient's 18%. The room was 21% oxygen. When just before I went to bed, I checked it.
Why did it make a sound? So that wouldn't make any-
Oh, well, it's not closed loop on this one.
Oh, and there's no muffler also.
For TV cameras, we have it off so they can pour in their own fuel. This was just used last night with CBS and Fox News when they came by to film it for the news, and they brought their own Mountain Dew to pour into it. These are, I'm sorry? Well, now, it's closed loop. There's no exhaust leaving the unit at all, none. The exhaust becomes the intake air. All of the units coming out in the future on our website will be like this without the ends on them. The ends will come separately. They'll overlap about a ½ inch. You can either clamp them on or you'll be able to weld them on. But then you can go ahead and fit it to whatever size engines you want. These will be posted up on the internet. Oh, sorry. They'll be posted on the internet so that you can see each new model as we come out with it. And if you do need something in the meantime, you'll be able to start emailing us after September 15th. That's when we're going to be starting to offer parts. The parts we have in the United States may not be the same as we have in Europe. There'll be a lot more metric over there, and over here we're not going to have that luxury. But so far, our great government doesn't want a lot of this out, so we're probably going to have a lot less components available here. We'll get them up as quickly as we can, depending on how fast the government decides to pull websites down. The Attorney General's office in Utah was so convinced that they could slow me down 4 years ago. They went out and bought paulpantone.com, paulpantone.net, Now, that's taxpayer money buying all those websites. So now we're going to Europe. And in Europe, we can get all the websites we need. We can market back this direction. I am not leaving the United States. My son is, his team is, they're going back to Europe. They're going to start teaching and production over there. What I'm doing here is teaching and setting up dealers. If people want to be a dealer or want to come to school, they come see me. We're doing the same thing in Australia, and we're going to be doing this around the world. We're going to have just certain people taught to handle what needs to be done. And if that's it for questions, we're over. Oh, go ahead.
For a natural gas engine, for an engine running on natural gas or any other gaseous material, where would it lie in your different rods that you've got, or is there any modification?
You'd have the natural gas supplied up the center of the exhaust pipe through a reactor rod chamber, like we've already shown, with about a 64th of an inch clearance on both sides of that rod.
Same rod for gasoline?
Well, it's just different tightness. So we're done.
You here?
Yeah, we're done. We're down to the last second or two of film.
Okay, is that it? Or did David have a question? Oh, here, hold on a second. Paul's protege.
I had a question. I was just wondering, I've seen your motors run in conference halls many times, and usually there's no exhaust smell. Is this one just not tuned up, or?
This one hasn't been touched in 4 years. Just grabbed it for this show, ran in, poured a little bit more soda in it, and fired it up.
Okay, last question.
My name is, yes. Paul, you obviously have encountered some really severe political obstructions, legal obstructions. There are similarities. But have you tested the waters since November 8th? My perception is the Obama people are not the same crowd. And you need, or we need, I'll use the we, to test now what's going on. If I'm right, if the sourcing and the data points we have politically are correct about Obama and company and their plans, this first is the clean coal solution. This is the cash for clunkers ultimate solution. This is all kinds of solutions.
And wouldn't this be Obama's best challenge to put GM back on the road?
Yeah, say that again.
Wouldn't this be the best way that Obama could help put GM back on the road? So if he's real, here I am. All he has to come knock on the door.
There hasn't been a change in my life.
You mentioned the Obama administration now in November. Before November and even after November, I've written personally to Obama and to the Vice President, and they were to be, and now they are, and I've written, and I pointed out that without mentioning the word Paul Pantone, that there's many, many different water type devices, and I mentioned just the patent number. That's the only clue, but that would solve many, many problems, you know, and make us independent of oil from terrorist nations, et cetera, et cetera. And now, I personally think that there's a good chance that you're right on that, but the letters get filtered, and I always said I would appreciate it if I could get some assurance that Obama actually had a chance to read this letter. Never, I mean, I'd get standard letters. Thank you for your interest, you know, we appreciate, you know, all that crap. But I've tested that, but I'm sure that it never got to him. If someone, see, he doesn't have to listen to me, maybe he would listen to you. But I just wanted to provide that input that, thank you.
By the way, Harvey's also one of the people that for many years did not miss a Saturday, let alone a lot of other times, working on Paul Pantone's defense. He's also an electrical engineer, multiple degrees, much in the same category Rob states, but he's someone also I'd just like to lend a little round of applause and appreciation. Without his participation, we wouldn't have made it. Okay? Now, with that, Paul Pantone and GEET, thank you very, very much, sir. Okay.